One day they're warm, attentive, always around. The next, cold, distant, gone. No explanation, just silence. And you're left wondering, what changed? Did I mess up? But here's the truth. When people suddenly start ignoring you, it's rarely about your worth. It's about their fear, their ego, and sometimes your growth. In this video, we'll uncover the real reasons behind sudden silence, why people vanish, what their behavior reveals, and how to respond without losing your peace. Using Stoic philosophy, we'll break down the manipulative games, the transactional ties, the influence of gossip, and the quiet discomfort people feel when you outgrow their version of you. If you've been ghosted, sidelined, or emotionally discarded, watch this before you chase for answers. And if you value clarity over chaos, like this video and subscribe to the channel. Let's bring truth back to the conversation. Now let's begin.
Number 1.
They are testing your reaction. Some people don't leave you because they're finished with you. They disappear to watch what you'll do. It's not closure thereafter, it's control. They withdraw affection, attention, and communication, hoping you'll chase, hoping you'll beg, hoping you'll break, because if you do, they win. To them, your emotional reaction isn't just a response, it's currency. It tells them how much power they still have. Stoic philosophy has long warned us against becoming slaves to the reactions of others. Seneca wrote, "No man is free who is not master of himself." When someone uses silence as a test, the wise response is not to play, not because you're indifferent, but because you refuse to be manipulated. This is emotional bait, and if you bite, they'll keep using silence to keep you in line. But here's the catch. Silence isn't always cruel. Sometimes it's revealing. It strips away the noise and forces us to confront the truth. Were they ever genuine, or were they just addicted to control? When someone ghosts you to gauge your reaction, what they're really doing is asking a question without words. How much of yourself are you willing to give up for me? And the Stoic answer is clear. None. Consider this. Marcus Aurelius faced constant tests from the Roman elite. He was surrounded by people who tried to sway his decisions through praise, withdrawal, flattery, or silence. But instead of reacting emotionally, he trained his mind to remain steady. In his meditations, he wrote, "Do not waste what remains of your life in speculating about others. It does not matter what they do or say." He knew that the moment you give emotional power to another, you begin to lose sovereignty over your own mind. This type of silent manipulation is especially dangerous because it's subtle. It doesn't yell, it doesn't accuse, it simply disappears and waits. And in that waiting, it hopes you'll come undone. But when you hold your center, when you refuse to chase, you flip the script. You turn their silence into your strength. And it's not just the ancients who understood this. Oprah Winfrey faced emotional withdrawal from people she once trusted early in her career. Instead of begging for their approval, she focused inward. She rebuilt her life on purpose, not performance. Her success came not from proving her worth, but from understanding it was never up for negotiation in the first place. The Stoics teach that reaction is the chain that binds us to suffering. Epictetus said, "It's not things themselves that disturb us, but our judgments about them." When someone vanishes and you panic, it's not their action that breaks you. It's your interpretation of it. You begin to think, "They're gone, so I must be worthless." But that's a lie whispered by ego, not truth spoken by reason. In fact, the moment someone disappears to test you, they reveal how fragile their sense of power is. Because people who are truly confident, truly whole, don't play games. They communicate, they express, they connect. Silence in this manipulative form isn't about maturity. It's about immaturity disguised as self-control. So how do you respond? You respond with calm. You maintain your rhythm. You continue living, not to prove you don't care, but because your peace is not up for negotiation. Detachment isn't bitterness, it's clarity. When someone creates distance to see how far you'll follow, let them walk. You don't need to chase what doesn't value your presence. Because here's the paradox of silence. Those who use it to test others will eventually be haunted by it themselves. The silence they hoped would manipulate you becomes the void they can't fill. Because you didn't move, you didn't react. You chose inner stillness over outer performance. And that is the true Stoic victory. Love, connection, respect. They are never meant to be earned through performance. They are meant to be given freely or not at all. If someone disappears to provoke a reaction, they were never really present to begin with. Let their silence speak. Let your response be even quieter. In that quiet, you rise. Because silence can be a weapon, but it can also be a shield. And when you use it to protect your dignity instead of chase validation, you don't just win the moment. You win yourself.
Number 2.
They no longer benefit from you. Sometimes people vanish, not because something went wrong, but because something stopped serving them. The moment your presence no longer provides an advantage, emotional, financial, social, or psychological, they withdraw quietly without a word, often without a trace of guilt. But make no mistake, this isn't abandonment, it's exposure. This kind of silence isn't personal, it's transactional. It reveals that many relationships weren't truly rooted in care. They were unspoken agreements built on, as long as you give me what I want. The moment that contract ends, so does their loyalty. And while it hurts, the Stoics would urge us to see it clearly, not as betrayal, but as revelation. Seneca reminds us, it is not the man who has too little, but the man who craves more, that is poor. Those who disappear once you stop providing are revealing how poor their character is. They were never invested in who you are, only in what they could extract. The danger is when you internalize their absence as failure, you think, maybe I should have done more. Maybe I'm not enough anymore. But that mindset is not only damaging, it's false. Your worth isn't in your giving, it's in your being, in your essence, in your presence. And those who couldn't see that never truly saw you to begin with. The Stoic path demands we stop measuring our value by the attention of others. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "When you arise in the morning, think of what a precious privilege it is to be alive, to breathe, to think, to enjoy, to love, not to chase, not to convince, just to live." And if you need proof that walking away from transactional ties leads to growth, look at Maya Angelou. She encountered countless people who wanted her talent, her words, her strength, but not her truth. When she stopped being convenient, many walked away, yet she didn't chase. She grew. She stood tall. She kept speaking, even when the room went silent. This is the Stoic ideal. Not to be loved for what you offer, but to be free in who you are. To no longer mourn those who vanish when your hands are empty, but to welcome the space they leave behind. In that space, authentic connection can take root, not based on use, but on truth. Furthermore, Epictetus taught that freedom is earned by releasing attachment to what you cannot control. Freedom is the only worthy goal in life, and that includes letting go of those who valued you only when you gave. Now, to be fair, not every departure is manipulative. Sometimes people outgrow each other. Sometimes the path splits. That's life. But when silence follows the moment you stop giving, or you set a boundary, that's not coincidence. That's exposure. That's someone revealing they were there for the gift, not the giver. So how should you respond? Not with bitterness, not with blame, but with grace. Pause, reflect, and thank them. Not for the pain, but for the clarity. They've shown you the difference between a supporter and a subscriber, between someone who loved you and someone who rented your presence. And while that truth can sting, it also sets you free, because now you're no longer guessing, you're no longer overthinking why they left. You see it clearly. They were there for the benefit, not the bond. And that clarity, though sharp, becomes a foundation for wiser relationships ahead. No more guilt, no more self-blame, just truth. You see, people who attach themselves to you based on benefits are like shadows. They only appear when the sun is shining. But when things get difficult, when you set limits, when you no longer overextend, they vanish. And while that absence hurts, it also frees you. It's a painful kind of gift, one that teaches you who's real and who was just there for the glow. And in that painful honesty, you find peace. As Epictetus said, wealth consists not in having great possessions, but in having few wants. Let that apply to people too. Want fewer, but want deeper. Seek those who see you, not those who invoice your soul. Because when you no longer feed their ego, their silence will scream, let it. You don't need to chase. You don't need to explain. You only need to protect your peace. Now let's move forward. Lighter, clearer, and stronger than before.
Number 3.
They are influenced by others. Sometimes people stop talking to you not because of what you did, but because of what someone else said you did. They don't ask. They don't verify. They don't give you a chance to explain. They simply change. Coldly, quietly, suddenly. And the silence you receive is not from clarity, but from contamination. This is one of the most painful forms of emotional exile. Being judged by a version of yourself that was crafted by someone else's fear, jealousy, or projection. The Stoics understood this well. Epictetus warned, if evil be spoken of you, and it be true, correct yourself. If it be a lie, laugh at it. But let's be honest. Being misjudged by someone you trusted doesn't always feel laughable. It feels like betrayal, silent, sharp, and undeserved. Why does this happen? Because not everyone has the courage to form their own view. Some people are so unsure of their own perception that they borrow the opinions of others, like secondhand clothes they wear without question. They're not evil, but they're mentally undisciplined, and weak minds are easily swayed by gossip, poisoned by rumors, and manipulated by the loudest voice in the room, especially when your growth triggers the insecurity of those still standing still. Now here's the painful truth. People don't always want the truth. They want comfort. And sometimes believing gossip is easier than facing the complexity of reality. Stoicism teaches us to expect this. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The opinion of 10,000 men is of no value if none of them know anything about the subject." So if people are talking about you but not to you, let that be the clearest message of all. They never truly valued your voice, only the image of you that was easy to control. Still, we crave justice. We want to defend ourselves. We want the conversation that never comes. But the Stoic path is not the path of performance. It's the path of inner clarity. You don't need to run around cleaning up other people's misunderstandings. You need to live in such a way that your actions over time dismantle every false narrative without a single word. Consider Eleanor Roosevelt. Throughout her life, she was the subject of constant criticism and fabricated scandal, often by people threatened by her voice, her advocacy, and her moral presence. But she didn't chase every rumor. She didn't spend her days defending herself to those who were committed to misunderstanding her. Instead, she built her legacy with action. She let time carry the truth forward. That's the Stoic response. Not silence from weakness, but silence from strength. The emotional toll is real. Being ghosted based on someone else's whisper leaves a bruise that logic can't erase. It shakes your trust in people. It makes you question how real the relationship ever was. But the pain carries wisdom. If someone's connection to you can be severed by a rumor, then what you lost wasn't a friend. It was an illusion. The Stoics never promised a painless life. They promised a powerful one. Epictetus taught, "Seek not that the things which happen should happen as you wish, but wish the things which happen to be as they are, and you will have a tranquil flow of life." When people distance themselves based on gossip, don't wish it away. Accept it. Let it filter your circle. Because the people who matter don't need a story. They seek understanding. And those who abandon you for a rumor were never truly present in the first place. So how do you respond? You respond with poise, with presence, with restraint. You don't plead for understanding. You don't beg to be seen. You let your life contradict the lie. You let your consistency replace your defense. Because in the long arc of time, character is louder than gossip. Here's the paradox. The more grounded you become, the more others will project. Some with admiration, some with resentment, some with false stories dressed as concern. But the Stoic doesn't need the world's approval. He only needs his own clarity. He stands in it, lives by it, and lets everything else fall away. Let them believe what soothes their insecurity. Let them listen to noise. You're not here to correct their perception. You're here to protect your peace, because those who are influenced by gossip were never strong enough to grow beside you in truth. Let them go.
Number 4.
You stopped playing by their rules. Some people don't disappear because you hurt them. They disappear because you stopped letting them hurt you. The moment you set a boundary, the dynamic shifts, the unspoken rules they once relied on, the expectations that you'd stay quiet, stay small, stay agreeable, are suddenly broken. And rather than adjust to your growth, they retreat into silence. At first it feels confusing. Why would someone pull away just because you asked for respect? But that question reveals everything. For some, your silence was comfortable when it served their dominance. Your kindness was acceptable when it didn't come with limits. But the moment you stop playing their game, the moment you say, "That doesn't work for me anymore," they vanish, not because you changed, but because you finally refuse to be changed by them. This is where Stoicism becomes your shield, Epictetus taught. If someone succeeds in provoking you, realize that your mind is complicit in the provocation. In other words, when people rely on predictable reactions, they depend on your unconscious compliance. When you disrupt that pattern, when you pause instead of react, set a boundary instead of absorb, they lose control. And for people who feed on control, your emotional independence is threatening. These are the people who treat access to you like entitlement. They expect to speak to you however they like, come and go as they please, demand your energy without earning your trust. But when you interrupt that cycle, when you stop showing up on command, they leave. Because their connection to you was never rooted in respect. It was built on your obedience. This isn't just theory, consider Viola Davis. As her career grew, she began to speak out about the roles she would no longer accept, the boundaries she would uphold, and the dignity she demanded as an artist. And what happened? Some people distanced themselves, offers dried up. The industry for a while turned cold, but she stood firm. She understood that compromise without self-respect is not humility. It's self-erasure. And like a true Stoic, she didn't beg to be kept. She chose to keep herself. Likewise, Marcus Aurelius reminded himself that others may resist your truth, but they cannot remove your integrity. Just that you do the right thing, the rest doesn't matter. That's Stoicism in practice, doing what's right for your soul, even when others disappear because of it. What makes this form of being ignored especially difficult is the guilt it tries to plant in you. You'll hear it in the silence. you're selfish, you've changed. But growth always feels like rebellion to those who benefited from your silence. And the longer you played by their rules, the more shocked they are when you stop. But remember, boundaries are not punishments. They are acts of self-respect. They mark the difference between peace and self-abandonment. And when someone walks away because you drew that line, they're not rejecting you. They're rejecting the version of you they can no longer control. The Stoic response is not to collapse into apology, it's to stand in clarity. When they ghost you for growing, let them. When they pull away because you stop performing, don't follow. Because every step you take toward your own truth is a step away from those who needed your silence to feel strong. Eventually, people who rely on your submission will label your strength as cruelty. That's not your burden to carry, as Seneca wrote. A gem cannot be polished without friction, nor a man perfected without trials. And sometimes that friction comes not from conflict, but from clarity. The quiet, unwavering kind that says, I'm no longer available for this version of the relationship. Yes, it might get lonelier before it gets lighter, but Stoicism doesn't promise comfort, it promises sovereignty. It trains you not to be liked, but to be whole, to walk alone if needed, rather than stay where your voice must shrink to fit. Because when you stop playing by their rules, you start living by your values, and that shift, while liberating, is uncomfortable for those who never respected your voice in the first place. Let them be uncomfortable. Growth isn't always graceful, but it is always necessary. So the next time someone walks away because you refuse to shrink, thank them, quietly, what they call abandonment, you'll one day recognize as alignment, a rebalancing, a return to yourself. Let them go without bitterness, without fear, with strength.
Number 5.
They are intimidated by your growth. Growth is rarely a neutral act. When you evolve, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, you don't just change your life. You change the dynamics around you, and not everyone will celebrate that. In fact, some will retreat, go silent, or vanish. Not because you wronged them, but because your growth reminds them of their own stagnation. You see, when you improve yourself, when you start healing, setting boundaries, becoming disciplined, people who are still living in their excuses start to feel uncomfortable. Not because you attack them, but because your presence now reflects what they've been avoiding in themselves. And for some, it's easier to disappear than to do the work. The Stoics understood this social tension, Marcus Aurelius wrote. Waste no more time arguing about what a good man should be one. His point was simple. Live your philosophy, don't shrink yourself to keep others comfortable. Don't dilute your character so others won't feel exposed. But understand that when you do rise, some will fall away, and that too is nature's wisdom at work. Growth forces a mirror into the room. It reflects effort, it reflects accountability, it reflects change, and not everyone is ready to face that mirror. Some prefer the comfort of denial over the discomfort of transformation. So instead of saying, I'm inspired, they say nothing. They pull back, they criticize from a distance or vanish into silence. That silence doesn't mean you did something wrong. It means you started doing something right. This is why the Stoic doesn't seek applause for personal growth. He understands that real development often disrupts false relationships. When your old patterns die, so do certain bonds. You're no longer available for small talk, self-betrayal, or validation loops. You start showing up differently, and that difference can feel threatening to those who remain unchanged. Look at Michelle Obama. As she began to evolve in her voice, her presence, her leadership, many distanced themselves. They weren't ready for her becoming, but she didn't shrink to win them back. She stood firm in who she was becoming, not who others needed her to remain. That's Stoicism in motion. Not needing permission to grow, and not pausing growth to preserve outdated dynamics. And the truth is, it doesn't take success to intimidate others. Sometimes your peace is what triggers them. Your self-control, your refusal to gossip, your choice to wake up early, read more, speak less. You don't need to brag, you just need to become. And that alone can unsettle those who still feed on drama and distraction. What's painful is realizing that people you once loved can't handle who you're becoming. You want to share your wins, your shifts, your deeper peace, but their silence answers the question you were afraid to ask. Were they here for all of me, or just the version of me that kept them comfortable? This is the silent tax of transformation. You lose things, you lose closeness, you lose connection, but what you gain is priceless: self-respect, clarity, alignment. Epictetus said, "Don't explain your philosophy, embody it. And when you do, you'll naturally repel those who only love the version of you that tolerated being less." It's tempting to downplay your growth, to pretend you haven't changed, to make others feel safe by hiding your transformation. But the Stoic knows that appeasement is not peace. It's a quiet form of self-betrayal, and peace that costs you your progress is a prison. Don't go back to it. So what should you do when someone disappears as you evolve? You honor the separation, not with bitterness, but with wisdom. Let them go. Don't explain. Don't beg. Don't water yourself down to fit an outdated frame. Because the version of you that's emerging needs space, and silence is sometimes the only way the world makes room. Here's the paradox. Those who were most loud in your old life may grow silent in your new one. And that silence isn't a curse, it's a signal. It's the universe saying, they're not meant for this version of your path. And the more you accept that, the more peace you'll feel walking forward, alone if necessary, but never misaligned again. As you rise, do not apologize. As you transform, do not pause. And as you lose people, do not chase. Because those who are intimidated by your growth are revealing their limits, not yours. Let them go. Number 6, you have exposed their true nature. Sometimes people don't disappear because you offended them. They disappear because you saw them clearly. You stopped pretending. You stopped making excuses for their behavior. You stopped allowing their mask to define the relationship. And in that clarity, they became uncomfortable. Because once someone realizes they can no longer deceive you, they have two options: grow or vanish. This is what happens when your presence becomes a mirror. Not one that flatters, but one that reflects. You didn't call them out with anger. You didn't confront them with cruelty. You simply started holding yourself to a higher standard. And in doing so, you revealed that they were never as kind, as honest, or as supportive as they pretended to be. This is why silence follows truth, because most people can't handle being seen without the costumes. They love the dynamic where you doubted yourself, where you made excuses for their inconsistency, where you tolerated manipulation, guilt-tripping, or subtle put-downs. But the moment you chose to see things as they are, not as you wish they were, they felt exposed, and that exposure made them run. The Stoics warned us not to cling to illusions, Seneca wrote. Most powerful is he who has himself in his own power. And that starts with radical honesty, especially about the people we've been protecting with denial. The Stoic doesn't resent people for showing their true nature. He's grateful, because when someone drops the act, the truth finally has room to speak. This isn't paranoia, it's pattern recognition. When you stop playing blind, you start noticing things that were always there. The way they twisted your words, the way they withheld support but expected loyalty, the way they praised you in public but criticized you in private. And instead of fighting to fix them, you start stepping back. You become silent, not out of weakness, but out of wisdom. That silence is powerful. It changes the air. And some people feel it immediately. They feel your shift. They sense your detachment, and it terrifies them. Not because you said anything, but because you finally saw everything. You saw through the charm, through the false closeness, through the manipulation that was hiding behind love, and now they're gone. Not because you did anything wrong, but because you did something right. You stopped feeding the illusion. You stopped playing small to preserve their comfort. You started asking better questions, holding higher expectations, and most importantly, you stopped explaining yourself to people who were never listening. Take Maya Angelou's wisdom. When someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time. She understood the cost of ignoring red flags, of justifying disrespect, of clinging to potential. But she also understood the power of self-respect, the kind that walks away without a scene, without revenge, without drama, just quiet recognition. When you expose someone's real intentions, not with accusations, but with clarity, they often respond with silence. That's not maturity, that's avoidance, because they're not interested in growth. They were interested in control, and now that control is gone. So is their desire to stay. Even in everyday life, you'll see this pattern unfold. Think of the friend who always needed you to listen, but never asked how you were. Or the coworker who thrived when you were insecure, but withdrew the moment you gained confidence. When you wake up to their behavior, not with rage, but with quiet certainty, you're no longer useful to their game, and so they vanish. The Stoic doesn't chase those who hide when the light comes on. He lets them go. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury." When someone leaves because you saw through them, you don't retaliate. You don't gossip. You don't unravel. You elevate. You let your composure say what your words never could. Still, there's a grief that comes with clarity. Not because you miss the person, but because you mourn the illusion. You realize the bond you thought you had was never mutual, that your loyalty wasn't reciprocated, that your kindness was seen as naivety. And that realization hurts more than any insult ever could. But it also sets you free, because now you don't have to keep pretending. You don't have to keep proving. You don't have to keep performing in a one-sided play. You are free to let the story end. And that ending, quiet, dignified, and honest, is the beginning of peace. Let them go. Sometimes being ignored is not rejection. It's revelation. It shows you who only stayed when you were silent, small, and easy to control. But now you're no longer chasing. You're observing. You're choosing peace over performance. And that makes some people disappear. Let them warfarn. The Stoic doesn't panic when people pull away. He pays attention, he protects his energy, and he walks forward, not with bitterness, but with quiet strength. If someone goes silent when you set boundaries, when you grow, when you stop being convenient, don't take it personally. Take it as information. Their absence speaks. Let it. And as you continue on your path, remember this. Your value doesn't decrease just because someone else couldn't handle it. You don't need to be louder. You just need to be clearer. Thank you for watching. If this brought you clarity or strength, like the video, subscribe and keep walking. Silently, steadily, stoically.